Hello, my name is Will Nunn. Wanted to give a shout out to Tyler Douthitt on my LinkedIn. He does these regular car talks where it's not talking about cars, it's talking inside of a car. And he gives some amazing business advice from what I've seen. Great stuff for entrepreneurs, and honestly great stuff for me as an educational leader. So I thought I'd give a shout out to all of my educational leaders as I drive into work today. It is here in St. Louis, approximately 6 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill in the negative teens, which I know for those of us, in Minnesota and farther northern areas, it's not that cold and you guys deal, but for us in St. Louis with such turbulent, fluctuating weather, it's cold today. So one of the greatest, most difficult decisions I think for any superintendent or CEO, depending on your school system, but any decision, I think one of the hardest decisions for a lead school leader is whether to have school or not. And so I just wanted to chat a little bit about that this morning as I was thinking about it. Obviously, I'm not a superintendent or CEO, I'm just an assistant principal, but in the administrative track, I always think about what would I do if I were in the seat of superintendent of a large school district. Some school districts have decided to have school today. Some school districts have decided to not have school today. Frequently, you can almost draw that along socioeconomic lines. So here's what I mean by that. If you have a more affluent family, so let's say you have a family where they have 2 cars, maybe both parents work, or maybe one parent pulls enough income for one parent to stay home, but they have a house that they know, they're fairly sure the heat's going to be on. If the heat's off, they have the means to get it back on. If something breaks in the house, they have the savings, or they have the financial security of some sort to fix it. Then generally a day as cold as today is not an issue. The kid, regardless of the age of the kid, can wait in the car with mom or dad, have a nice warm space for them to get on the bus, or even get taken to school, and it's really a non-issue. What happens though is when you have families that don't have those financial means, when you have families whose house, maybe 100 years old and extremely drafty, maybe have a 45-year-old furnace, a 20-year-old furnace, and the 45-year-old furnace is definitely not working. If they have, a 15, 20-year-old furnace, and they don't know if they can get it turned on or not, if it breaks, or if they don't have a car at all. I was thinking, I know I have some families in my school that don't have any kind of transportation. They rely on public transportation, which means they're sitting at a bus stop that may be a block or 2 from their house in negative 16-degree wind chills, and you're talking about a 7 or 8-year-old. I don't think that makes sense really to anybody. And it's not to pass judgment on anyone on either side of the issue. It's a difficult choice. And so I think here is what administrative leaders have to weigh. Ultimately, that they have to think about the good of their kids, and will most of their kids be able to make it to school on a day as cold as today without exposing themselves to some kind of harm? Because the thing is, when it's this cold, if you have exposed skin, you're running the risk of frostbite, you're running the risk of skin damage, and for a small child, that's a problem. If a grown adult wants to walk outside without a coat on, they can accept the ramifications. But if a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old walks outside without a coat on, they're not in full control of their faculties. They're not really responsible for what they do. Their parents are, and the adults that take care of them are responsible for that. So it's a very difficult decision. So you have to think about the good of your kids. Also, I know superintendents have to think about the politics of their district, because ultimately, whatever school system you're in, you're answering to the parents of your kids. They have to be satisfied with what you're doing. But even more so, the taxpayers in your district, who may or may not be parents, you have to answer to them. And so it's all relative, right? So my daughter's school is a very large school district, and they're competing with other very large school districts in the area. So they need to be competitive. They need to be focused on results. And quite frankly, most of their kids are affluent. I think the district itself is only maybe 25% free and reduced lunch. So as cold-hearted as it seems, they have to make a decision that meets the needs of a majority of their constituents, and that means that some kids likely will not be at school today. I really hope those parents at any rate keep their kids home rather than putting them out in the cold on the bus stop. But and so that's the choice they have to weigh. Whereas other schools, like the one where I work, and other schools in more urban settings, they have a higher free and reduced lunch population. They have a higher need of socioeconomic support, and so many of them have decided to call school today because most of their constituents, most of their customers, if you will, don't have a safe way to get to school. So when you're thinking about snow days, especially if you're a parent, I know kids, and if you're an educator, and haven't thought about the administrative side of things, look, I know adults get just as excited about snow days as kids do when you don't have to go to school, especially if you're an educator. Shout out to all the teachers having a good cold day at home. Enjoy that. But I just wanted to put this out there in case anybody was wondering, what are they thinking? It's a very difficult decision because you can't make everybody happy. And so before you say mean things about an administrator, superintendent online, or before you say mean things about them, in person in some fashion, just take a second and think about this. You have, thousands of parents in your district, and with one decision, one phone call that you're making, mind you, at 4:30 in the morning, likely, you're going to, in some way or another, offend at least 25% of them. Maybe closer to 50% of them, depending on your district. So in some districts it's really clear. In other districts it's not. In districts that have decided to close today, they're making a decision ultimately to keep their kids safe, but they're also in some ways, in this instance, to talk about it like really, we are actually increasing the gap of education between our socioeconomically disadvantaged kids and the kids who have more affluence. And so that's kind of the maybe elephant in the room, or maybe a way to think about it that we're not thinking about it. But if we can draw it along socioeconomic lines like I'm thinking here, then that means that kids who don't have much means are not at school today, and kids who do have much means are at school today, on top of the academic language they'd likely get at home, on top of the better meal quality they're getting at home. It's a tough situation in our country. So anyway, that's maybe another commute chat or whatever I decide to call this thing. But yeah, in your comments, feel free to tell me ways I can improve this, if this is something that is helpful, especially to educators. Just kind of expressing some thoughts. I'm looking for dialogue, and hopefully looking to brighten somebody's day if any way possible. So hey, you matter, you're important, you are making a difference in the world today, so go do that, enjoy that, and it's a pleasure to get to know you.